Lawyers of Reddit, what was your hardest client to defend in court? One of my clients stabbed a McDonald's employee through the drive-thru window, and when he was arrested they found 4 grams of powdered morphine in his sock. And, why did he stab a McDonald's employee through the drive-thru window? Of all people and places. He was upset that he received a quarter pounder with cheese with no burger. It's a toss-up between the admitted child rapist and the mother who lost custody when CPS found out her 6 kids were sleeping in a dank basement and getting molested by older cousins. With her knowledge, I'm shocked in these last few years learning how many families are just full of rampant raping and molesting, like it's the family tradition. In Australia I knew an intellectually impaired woman. She had been used as a sex toy by her father and her brothers starting from less than 10. Not only was she intellectually impaired, she was also extremely small, less than 5 feet tall. I wonder if the trauma affected her growth. I do not know if her impairment preceded or was a byproduct of her abuse. She did wind up later having a relationship with her child. She then lost custody of the child because she was deemed an unfit mother, which she may have been. She could not speak, just make funny sounds. But she was able to read and write fairly well. Client was a nurse who had administered a fatal injection. Killed a baby. It was a long story. TLDR. I got her off any charges of negligence many years ago, but this case will stay with me forever. After hours. Small rural hospital. Understaffed and under-equipped. Pediatric ward. Baby very ill with gastroenteritis and hadn't responded to weeks of treatment. Was losing weight despite everything. There was no doctor on the pediatric ward that night, or, in fact, in the entire hospital. When the lab phoned the baby's blood work results into the nurse on duty and said the baby was going to die soon if he didn't receive urgent treatment, nurse phoned the doctor on telephonic call, who wasn't supposed to go in. Having already worked long hours that day, just be available for phone calls, and the doc gave instructions for a sister to give an ampoule of potassium chloride. She wrote down the instruction. The doc didn't specify that it be given orally, which was what was meant, but because the doc specified that a sister must give it, she assumed it should be an injection as she herself wasn't qualified to give injections, but a nursing sister is. The nurse called the sister from the maternity ward to carry out the instruction. Explained the urgency. The sister was very busy in the maternity ward, but came to the pediatric ward and gave the injection. Baby passed away from immediate cardiac arrest. The partners in the firm didn't want to touch the case as they thought it was impossible. But in our law, negligence has a specific definition. I won the case for the nursing sister by arguing that my client was trying her best with only the instructions and resources at hand, under circumstances where she had been told the patient would die very soon if the treatment wasn't given. She was an amazingly dedicated person, and what happened had completely devastated her. She wanted to quit nursing. I hope she changed her mind after that. Afterward, the one good thing that came out of this tragic event was that I mentioned to a local Rotary Club member that the hospital in question desperately needed some telemedicine equipment, knowing that the club had such a project, and shortly after that they were able to make a donation of equipment to the hospital. I even coincidentally saw that doctor in passing years afterwards, and the doctor was so grateful for that equipment. Close bracket. Edited to add, this was not in the USA. What a tragic miscommunication. She was just trying to save the baby, and I'm sure she would have given it orally had it been so specified. A 16-year-old kid who committed robbery and sexual abuse. He had zero remorse. A sociopath then. Or like, was he capable of remorse, but just didn't have any for his particular offenses? I don't think he was a sociopath. He just had complete disregard for authority, disrespected the judge and so on. And my superior told me the kids are the worst. They simply don't care. And it was completely true. The cases involving adults that I was assigned were easier to deal with since they genuinely were scared of going to jail. This was during an internship in pubic defense in Dominican Republic. Sorry if there's bad translation, but that kid just had this smirk all the time. I felt quite uneasy. Had a woman charged with violating a no contact order. The order said that she wasn't to come within 100 yards of her ex's house. Cops pull up to X's house and she's standing in the front yard, waving her arms and screaming. I was racking my brain for something to argue to the jury as a reason to find her not guilty. Didn't really come up with much, Your Honor. My client has a deranged identical twin. That simply was not her. Judge, do you expect me to believe that this woman has a twin no one knew about? Lawyer, Your Honor, it is up to the other team to prove she doesn't have a twin. Judge, well, I have just watched The Prestige, so I'll allow it. Case dismissed for lack of proof. It was really this lady and not a twin. I do family law. My hardest clients are the ones that low-key alienate their children from an ex over personal feelings. They don't see it, or why the behavior is a problem, and they are usually very unlikable people. Don't get me wrong. I have repped bad people who still manage to be likable, but not these walnuts. Workplace accident caused the death of a worker. I represented the company, defending against charges of negligence, various health and safety violations. The owner clearly didn't take safety seriously and constantly complained about was how this was hurting his business. I'm never gonna financially recover from this. Got a DUI client who had kicked his trial date down by almost 2 years. Had a history of DUI, but had cleaned up his act until this one. His story: he was sitting in his car waiting for a ride when he got picked up. No keys in the ignition. Talked to the cops by opening the door. No way he could have hoped to drive the thing. Cop's story: keys were in the ignition and window was down. No one disputing that he was shit-faced. His case was winnable, but for one thing, he couldn't leave his damn trap shut on the stand. If I asked him the time, he told me where his watch was made and what the name of the clerk was who sold it to him. Classic mouth diarrhea sufferer. His friends were his other witnesses, and I couldn't have asked for better ones. The police were the prosecutor's witnesses, and I poked holes in their testimony, left and right. The case was far from an airtight acquittal, but I had more than enough reasonable doubt to win, except for my client, who revealed on the stand that it was his 4th DUI, when, as far as anyone on the jury was concerned, it was his first. Then he couldn't keep his story straight on how he talked to the cop. Opening the window vs cracking the door makes a difference, because the key would have had to be in the ignition for the windows to roll down. And if I tried to rein him in, he went off on another tangent. And this was all after refusing to plead to a stipulated first offense, which would have been fines and traffic school. Instead, he torpedoed his own case, got convicted, got something like 60 days in jail and a shit ton of costs. And I got frustratingly close to a win. I wanna know how the conversation went between the two of you after the trial. Did he even understand how ducking stupid he was? Very likely he did not. Have a neighbor who was part of defense team for a high profile case where person was clearly guilty, said at that point, it's just about getting them a fair trial. Negotiating conditions of confinement, maximum/medium/minimum security, proximity of prison to family, etc. Makes sense. Did the person himself admit to it? Couldn't remember. Just googled and looks like they did plead guilty. Lawyer here. I don't normally do litigation, but as a pro bono project, and for some experience doing a different kind of law, I served as guardian ad litem for these 2 kids stuck in a high conflict child custody dispute. Guardian ad litem basically means that the court appointed me to represent the kids whose parents are fighting over them. This is oversimplifying slightly. In other words, I didn't represent either parent, but both parents wanted me on their side, since my opinion of the case would be influential with the judge. It was a complete shit show. Both parents were very low income, basically living off of various forms of government assistance. Each had several other kids with other partners. The mom said that the dad sold drugs, and that both kids were conceived via rape, and the dad was recently out of prison for sexual assault. The dad said that the mom is a prostitute who neglected the kids, and there were various reports from the kids' school that corroborated this. One of the kids, the sister, was super cute, but the other, the brother, called his sister a hoe in open court and said he hated her. Luckily the parents agreed to a joint custody arrangement before it went to trial. This experience confirmed for me 1000% that I do not want to be a litigator, especially in family court. What a ducking miss. Wow, that's rough. Poor kids. Probably. That type of situation doesn't breed generational wealth. My friend always has to defend people that shoplift at Walmart. For some reason they think they can get out of it, even though there is clear video showing them stealing and getting apprehended with the stolen merchandise. As someone with a misdemeanor for shoplifting from Walmart, I paid for a lawyer knowing full well I wasn't going to magically get off. I just wanted to avoid spending a weekend in jail. It was one of the dumbest things I've ever done. But getting a lawyer was absolutely a smart move. I'd pay for a good criminal lawyer, no matter the crime. What goes on your record will cost you more. Defense attorney here, and honestly sometimes the hardest clients to defend aren't the guiltiest, but the ones who are just assholes. I've had some really sweet, nice clients who are guilty as sin, and my goal is to get them the best outcome. Make sure their constitutional rights are protected. Easy. But the clients who lie to me because they think it'll make me work harder if I think they're innocent. The clients who call me a public pretender. The clients who call me nothing more than a mouthpiece for the damn. Those are the hardest for me to defend. But don't get me wrong. I'll still fight hard as hell for all my clients. What kind of dumbbit calls their own lawyer a mouthpiece for the DA? The one who's getting his stupid butt thrown in jail for his own stupidity. My story doesn't involve sex, drugs or fights. Sorry, I've been a lawyer for almost a year now, so this was one of my first cases. My father-in-law asked me to help a friend of his who was having trouble with his driver license. Turns out he had the license revoked because he passed a red light. Went to talk with the guy. He told me that wasn't him using the vehicle and that didn't receive any notifications. I went to the transit department to get the files of the ticket, and man, it was clear as day that was him in the vehicle. I mean, he was in fact wearing the same shirt of his driver license picture. Lol. I was almost giving up. Told him he could apply for a new driver license and wasn't a big deal. But he confessed to me that he actually had bought that license, paid lots of money and couldn't afford a new one. He is a good driver, but he almost can't read, so he couldn't but the writing test. As you may know, I had a legal obligation of keep his secret. Anyway, here in my country, in order to respect the due process of law, transit department needs to send 2 notifications to a person, one about the ticket and other about the punishment. We managed to prove that they didn't send the notifications, so he couldn't defend himself. Therefore, the process is invalid. I didn't get into the subject of whether or not he was driving though. Now he is happily driving, and my father-in-law is proud of me. He bought the license, and it was revoked. Cold and read, so cold and bud test, and now he is happily driving. Question mark? I'm guessing he greased the right palms to get a legal license less than legally. The guy who told the judge he was going to strangle me in front of jury if he didn't remove me from his case. I bet that went really well for him. No, not great. Dude is now doing life. He took a 60-year plea rather than go to trial with me. He then was convicted of murdering another dude in prison a few years later and got life. The man was / a little rough around the edges. He told the prison guards, just so you guys are aware, if the judge forces me to keep meth head as my attorney, I'm going to strangle him to death. The guards go, well, we appreciate you telling us that, and since we're all being so honest here, if you make a furtive movement towards meth head, we will tase the duck out of you. Apostrophe. Years earlier, I had another dude who had promised the deputies that he was going to stab a deputy before his stay at the jail was done. During trial, they stationed a plainclothes cop behind me every day and told me, meth head, if your client goes for you, please dive away from him. We don't want to shoot / tase you by accident. My client leaned over and goes, what the duck are those pigs taking about? Question mark. I said I was going to stab one of them, not you. That dude is also doing life. He was much more pleasant though. He used to leave voicemails on my phone that began, hey meth head, how's that sweet butt doing? NG. Funny guy. Had a client who wanted a 8-figure settlement for an employment discrimination case. Threatened to file a state bar complaint because I told her the case wasn't worth it. Wouldn't consent to letting me withdraw, and basically took her legal advice from God instead of me. What happened after that? She refused an extremely reasonable settlement, and then, as I warned her, she lost her case. I quit shortly thereafter because I could not handle another client like her. I heard afterwards that she wanted to appeal the court's ruling. Not a lawyer here, but my dad was. One of his hardest cases was a day I had to go to work with him. The judge was very understanding. He gave me a legal pad to take notes. I was maybe 3 and couldn't read or write, but I took the pad and pen he gave me and I copied what everyone else was doing. All it was squiggles and dots. But hey, I took notes. After he heard the argument, the judge took my notepad back and checked my notes. He played along, told me they were excellent notes. He then told me that I did good and asked me if I thought my dad had a better argument. I said yes, because he's my dad. My dad lost the case because the answer was blatant, but still best memory ever. Side note, he was an environmental lawyer. The case was about a house being built near a wetland and the distance of it and the power used. He lost, but hey, it worked. Such an adorable story. It's a breath of fresh air compared to the more depressing ones here. If you had become a lawyer, this could have been your origin story. Funny part? The judge went by Dick. So for a guy named Dick, he was a good guy. Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe for more videos.